Hi, welcome to Wrokdown. I'm Wendy Stapleton. Marshall's portable music machine was #1 on the Australian national charts for over 25 weeks. This monster hit shot my next guest into pop stardom. You may be wondering where he went. Well, he's right here. Would you please welcome Mr. Robin Jolley? Hey, Rob.
Hey, Wendy. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a few years since we've seen you this side of the camera. I know that you've spent quite a few since on the other side of the camera.
Yeah.
Producing, directing.
Producing, yes. Mostly for people like Bert Newton and Daryl Summers and Ernie Sigley.
Oh, really?
That's to name a few, yeah. In fact, one of the last times I was on this side of the camera, I was producing a segment on one of Bert's programs and looking after a guest at the same time, which became quite confusing for the lady whose name was Christine Keeler, who is a fairly
The Profumo affair?
Yes, fairly well.
How do I know that?
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that came about as a result of that was that I had to have her sign a release form for the program to be aired overseas, and she was on a promotional tour for the movie called Scandal, which was about her life story, if
Dusty
you recall, a few years back.
Sang the hit song, didn't she?
I think she did. And anyway, it's precisely that scenario that got her into trouble in the first place with the Profumo affair when she signed a release for a press person to print her story. So I had a hell of a time trying to convince her to sign this release form. There you go.
Because she was freaked out about what it was actually getting herself into. You're a Brunswick boy.
I am.
Born and bred?
Born and bred. Spent most of the first 10 or 12 years of my life in Brunswick East, Brunswick West. Yeah.
It's a good area.
It's a good area. Attended the Brunswick Primary School, Brunswick East Primary School, which turned out to be pretty lucky for me actually as life progressed, because it was a terrific place to go to school. But more importantly, by the time I was in grade 5 or 6, my teacher was also a music teacher. He was the music director of the gang show. I don't know if you recall the gang shows.
The Scouts.
The big annual show of the Scouts. Yeah. So. And he took such an interest in. He was kind of a guy who took such a huge interest in his students' musical interests, and he developed it through a number of people in our class, if you like. He formed a choir. We appeared on The Happy Show. He took us to see The Sound of Music. We recorded our own musicals each year.
So he inspired you.
Oh well, he's probably one of the most influential people musically in my life, because he taught me I could sing for a start, and encouraged it.
But that's what started your love of entertainment and love of music.
It was, and the fact my dad was a musician as well.
Oh, was he?
Yeah,
what did he play?
He played what's called in brass band circles a double B flat bass, and he played the Hawthorn City Band. He played in 2 successful A-grade competitions at South Street, which was fantastic.
Very big, because South Street's a big competition.
Yeah, and they won it twice when I was little, and because he wanted me to be a cornet player, so he'd dutifully drive me to cornet lessons on a Monday night, hop in the car, drive to Box Hill, cornet lessons home, blah. So I did that till I was about 13 or 14 when I started singing. How
did it turn out that you got, I think, first into television as a singer?
Yeah, well, I suppose I started in bands when I was 14, 15,
Okay.
just playing around town, playing around Melbourne, and that sort of. I suppose we did that for a number of years. In the days when one of the best Saturday night dances around town was at the Dandenong Town Hall. Yeah.
And what was the name of your first band?
It was called Windy and Warm.
Oh.
But that's because two of the guys in the band were fans of Chet Atkins. It's a instrumental name of an instrumental recorded by Chet Atkins. Yeah, it raised a few eyebrows, that name, Windy and Warm.
And what sort of stuff were you actually playing?
Oh, just pop covers. Yeah. And inevitably, I suppose that led to you're probably too young to remember Uptight and.
Oh no. Well, I remember definitely. Well, that was Ross D. Wiley.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And then Jeff Phillips.
And I remember Commotion. And Go Show.
Yeah, Go Show, certainly, because Commotion was everyone mimed.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Molly was on it.
Molly was on it.
Can Molly sing?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, certainly not.
Whose idea was that? Who was actually producing it?
Oh, wow. I can't recall.
Can't remember.
I can't recall, no. But
It'd be interesting because it was as I said, really the beginning of everything starting to come out of Melbourne, wasn't it? It was like the...
That's true. That's true. It really did focus the pop music industry in Melbourne as its at its core, as the centre of where you had to work, where you had to come to essentially record, to promote. If you didn't really make it in Melbourne, you hadn't made it.
On those shows. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, let's talk about your role in those TV shows.
Okay.
Be back soon.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest is Robin Jolley. Rob, how did you actually end up on these television shows? Did someone just come up to you at a gig or approach you?
It really just came about as an opportunity to sort of self-promote, if you like, to lift the band's profile. So you go into the studio, record a couple of tracks, send them in. If they like them, it's an opportunity that almost doesn't exist anymore. In fact, it doesn't exist anymore, which is a real tragedy. Without putting yourself into a competition environment, So, it was simply that. And after a couple of appearances on that program, I came home. I think I was due to go. In the call up for Vietnam that year. That was about 6 months away, and I arrived home. There was a telegram at home, come from Tasmania, from someone I'd never heard of in Tasmania, who said, "Like what you do, would you consider going solo?" I think 19 and a half. I thought, why wouldn't you? So anyway, we over the next couple of months had some conversations. I flew down to Tasmania, met the guy. His name's Neville Kent. He became my manager, and we set out to. He had a plan that he thought was a plan, and a man with a plan is always,
better than one without.
One without.
Yeah.
So so we set about creating a recording career.
So you eventually Neville. Decided it was time to...
He moved to Melbourne. We actually recorded the Marshall's portable music machine ourselves, funded it, recorded at Armstrong's at 100
Albert Road.
100 Albert Road. The old
but
studio.
how did you, did Neville find that for you?
No, it was, Brian Cadd had just come back in the country, and we got hooked up with Brian through a guy called Paul Connick, who used to be a DJ in Melbourne on 3KZ years ago, but who was then he was doing A&R or promotions for Warner Brothers Records in Melbourne. So Paul wanted to put it out through Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers said no. Brian said, "I'll take it to Ron Tudor." Ron Tudor said yes, and
so what year was that?
72. Yeah. So and that song, Marshall's Portable Music Machine, started life as a jingle for a sewing machine. And in fact,
really?
it was a throwaway track as it was to be a B-side of a song called another song I can't bring to mind.
Okay.
However, the other side was to be the hit, the song that was released. Marshall's was a throwaway. Peter Jones did the arrangements for that, and I see Peter fairly regularly. He lives near me.
Isn't he gorgeous?
And he apologised to me just only about a year or so ago for the arrangement. I don't know why he did. But
Say hello, will you?
I will. So it escaped more than anything. One of my favourite stories about Marshall's portable music machine, or the release of any single record. This sounds like one of those prophetic soap operas. But Neville and I, we were about to part company at the time the record was released. After having put in 2 years' work, we'd had a bit of a falling out, and he said, "I want you to drive me to the airport." I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because I'm going home." I said, "Oh, you're joking." Hadn't been any discussion, except that I was now romantically involved with the woman I'm still married to 40 years later. And I think he perceived that was going to get in the way of a career, and he might have been right. I've got no idea. But we sat in the airport at Tullamarine, and he was about to get out of the car to leave, and you wouldn't believe it. It came on the radio.
So you'd already recorded it?
It had gone to radio that day, and it got picked up that day, and I turned on, the radio was on, and it came on 3XY, and that's the only reason he stayed.
How was it for you to, I mean, you'd worked around quite a lot, but to literally go from this to like an overnight, you were a pop sensation.
Yeah, and totally ill-prepared. I mean, I look back at some of those old things that show up on YouTube from time to time, and it's just cringeworthy.
But you've done all the television beforehand, so
yes, I know, but
at least you had that sort of bit going for you.
I know, but I think it was so hit and miss. No one ever said, "Listen, by the way, that was all right, but if you did this and a bit of that, this might be, might round the picture off a bit." Oh, okay. But
no one ever did.
No, there was no one ever really concentrated on improvement. I think it wasn't an industry yet per se.
No, and getting back to, as you said, you were sort of actually ill prepared for the stardom. What did you have to do?
Stage fright, totally terrified.
You had to get a backing band? Or
Nope,
did you just go out solo? And
travelled with Doug Trevor from the Cherokees became my MD, and we travelled together for quite a few years.
So would you just go with
all
your
over the country.
guitarist and pick up the bands on
Whatever was going.
at the venue?
Whatever was going.
And do a spot?
There are some terrifying experiences from those days, yeah.
So you recorded quite a few more singles?
Yeah, I did. And but across various genres, you'd say. So one of the mistakes that you can make in as a pop singer per se.
Because that was a real pop song, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was only ever intended. I think as a strategy, these things are only intended to capture attention, and it did that. But at the same time as capturing people's attention, what it does is it
puts you in a certain box, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. Whereas I suppose before that I was something other than what that might have portrayed. But then what you'll learn later about marketing is you can't confuse your market. Well, I certainly did confuse the market because.
Well, you'd probably confused yourself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. As part of that process.
You don't know when you don't realise when it starts off that something like that's going to happen to you.
No, you don't. And unless, unlike as I said today, that when it is an industry, and it's probably more of an industry than it really ought to be, where things can be totally manufactured. There were so few people around that had any informed ideas, I think, as to how to market music at all, or a musical product, that most people were left to their own devices, and you stood or fell according to the decisions you made that weren't always the best.
Well, the thing was that it was such early days here that it was you made it up as you went along, didn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And made the best of the opportunities that you could create or that presented themselves. You know.
Did any great opportunities present because of that?
Yeah, a few that. I mean, Marshall's portable music machine went to number 4 in Holland. It was released in Holland. It all comes back.
Japan?
I never think. I recorded it in Japanese. I did record it in Japanese.
How did you do that?
Yeah. Kimi ga hitori kiri de, samasi hitoki ni ne, manga no samusamusa no hi. Apologies to the Japanese people though.
But that were the lyrics?
Yeah, it was. And it turned out, and I spent time with a Japanese...
I'll ring my friend Kyoko and make sure she watches that episode.
Okay. With an interpreter who taught me to the phonetic values of the language to record it. But she looked at me, she said, "Oh, not very good." And
what
said,
did
"What
she
do you mean?"
mean?
Well, she said it reads like a jingle for an alcohol company. So I did sing it in Japanese once to a bunch of Japanese tourists in Perth at a nightclub one night, and they just went.
I think.
I thought, I
think you have to get it back and revisit what she'd actually translated for you. Could have been.
Oh, it was a mess, I'm sure, but that didn't happen. And but Holland did, and was supposed to get on a plane to go to sing at the Eurovision Song Festival and blah 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 blah. You know, this is the things that do and don't happen. But the most annoying thing was, I had a cousin whose wife was working in the biggest FM radio station in Los Angeles at the time, and she got hold of a copy. She gave it to the program manager, and he started to play it. They said, "You've got to get this record released here now." I went, "Well, how do we do that?" We had an agent, but he was sitting somewhere in a garret in New York. A lawyer in New York was the American representative of Fable or whoever it was, released it in those days. So you get other opportunities that don't coalesce. You say, right, this is getting played in Los Angeles, but nowhere was there a record in a shop to sell. So,
well, look, we'll take another short break. We'll come back, talk about the fact that after your recording career, you went into production with some very, very big names. We'll be back very soon.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My guest is Robin Jolley, and we were just in the middle of a very interesting conversation about the fact that you have to sometimes go into radio stations and just be basically abused.
And put your heart and soul on the line. But that's the way it goes.
It's tough.
Yeah. Yes it is. But lots of other issues play into that, don't they? So They weren't just musical
Musical
professional
things.
issues. Yeah.
But you had found a niche in television.
Well, in fact, the last couple of years I sang for a living. Was in a band called a band that's well known in Melbourne, probably not elsewhere, is the Blue Echoes, and they became the
huge,
Echoes.
yeah.
I sang with the Echoes for probably 18 months, and then
With
decided
Phil and
after Phil, I came in. Phil left, I came in. I left, Phil came back.
Ah, okay.
Anyway, and they continued to do very well. But by that stage, I'd looking for other things to do. And an opportunity to produce television came up, produce and host television at a country station in Victoria, which was then called BTV6. It's now Win Television.
Win Television's huge. Mm.
So I produced a kids show up there for a couple of years and hosted it, and got involved in production at the local station up there because there used to be a Tonight Show done live out of BTV6 throughout Western Victoria through those years with a guy called Fred Farger. And so I got entrenched up there for a bit, and kids show was on the air for a couple of years. I produced Ernie Sigley up there, actually. Ernie came to the country for a while to do a Thursday night variety program.
He did. Is that up near Ballarat?
In Ballarat.
Ballarat.
Yep.
With Dennis Walter was up there as well, wasn't he?
Later.
Later, yeah.
Dennis read the news up there for
That's
a time.
right, yeah.
And so produced Ernie up there for a bit, and then moved home. Moved into television production. I joined Grundy's for a while to produce a game show, Price is Right.
Oh, dear.
And then left to go to Channel 9 to produce the music on the Daryl Summers, when Daryl was doing a Tuesday night variety show. And after, I think, a period of doing that, Channel 9 offered him the opportunity to take Hey Hey at Saturday to live on a Saturday night. So I started with the live Hey Hey on Saturday night, and moved then from there to a production with Ernie Carroll as Aussie Ostrich, producing a kids show called the Aussie Ostrich Video Show. I did that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah.
big production jobs.
Yeah, that was really good fun. I really did enjoy that. And then produced breakfast radio for a while on with Darren James and Bruce Mansfield.
I know.
Yeah,
Darren.
And then did some other things for a while, and then went back to do Bert, produce Bert. Oh, not produce Bert. I was a segment producer on Bert's midday show at Channel 7. I did that for a bit, and a year or so, and then he was offered the opportunity to do the morning program at Channel 10.
At Channel 10.
Which I then went to produce. Yeah.
So you've done a lot of TV production.
Yeah, I've tried something over 20 years. Yeah.
I know now actually you'll have to explain. I know that you've management, is it, or?
Well,
it's a big job.
About 12 years ago or so, I got involved. I don't know if you remember his name, but there was an icon of Melbourne rock and roll who was not in rock and roll but in security. His name was Bob Jones.
Yes.
Well, Bob's a dear friend of mine, and about 12 years ago we got involved in the venture to put a training company together, which we did, and training people in hospitality and security and various industries, and we did that for a bit, and for a while, and then I moved out of that and into managing government contracts for what's called now called Australian Apprenticeship Centres. So basically the marketing.
So that sort of came out of the training with Bob.
It did exactly. It translated straight into that. So I've been working managing government contracts since then for apprenticeship centres.
And I know for a fact that you've had a very, very happy marriage and you've got a wonderful family. You're still married to that same girl that you met?
I am still married to that same girl. When we were 19, we worked together in the public service. I lasted 6 months because it was a Transport Regulation Board, and I got a red letter one day. It said, "I need to see you downstairs, Chief Inspector." And he said, he sat me across the desk and said, "Listen, son," he said, this hair. Oh yes, this hair. Said, "Either it goes or you go." I said, "Well, I'll see you later." And I left. So I lasted 6 months in the government at that stage, but my wife, that's where I met my wife. So, and we got married.
She didn't mind the hair at all?
Not at all. And we were married 3 years later.
So it's been a long time, and you've got a beautiful family?
I have two grown-up children. I have, my son's now has 3 children of his own.
Not at all into music? I mean,
Yes,
into
yes,
music, but
yes.
is he a
Yeah,
performer?
he did actually. He did a
Really?
stint on the. He did. I won't embarrass him, but he's written some really good songs, and recorded some really good songs. And very recently, the album was submitted to Sony, and Sony said, Sony Britain said, we'll have that until they saw the photographs, and he's 10 years too old now, which is a bit sad, isn't it? Never mind.
Nothing a Doris Day filter can't fix, as we
like
all
that.
know.
Must remind you
As
of
we
that.
all know. Rob, it's been lovely to catch up with you, and you have really, really had a very, very interesting life. And I can honestly say that probably if you'd stayed in the music industry, you mightn't have been married as long.
That's quite possible, Wendy.
Thank you so much
Really
for
good
coming
to
on the
see you.
show.
Really good to see
Thank
you.
you. See you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.